Pleased to welcome into the program Joe Smith, beat writer for The Athletic, covering the Tampa Bay Lightning. Joe, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
Terrific, thank you. Always look forward to a Stanley Cup final game here, and the Tampa Bay Lightning have a 3-1 series lead. It could be exciting either way, whether they're handing out the Stanley Cup tonight, or can you imagine if Montreal is able to force a Game 6 back in Montreal, how nuts they would go for that. So to tee this one up, we'll just start with the feeling in Tampa. I know the mayor wanted the Lightning to throw a game. How much action did that get within Tampa Bay, whether it's with the players or on radio or with the fans? Did that get a lot of action? Because we spent a lot of time focusing on those comments leading up to Game 4.
Action, like nationally, or whether it's Canadian media or even like the national media, because like obviously, the comments were made in jest and kind of trying to be funny, and I don't think she wanted to throw a game, but I think it's the moral of the story is they wanted, this fan base has watched the Lightning from afar win the Cup last year. They didn't get to go any of the playoff games of the Cup clincher, and now they've been kind of this buzz has been still build until all of a sudden this 16,000 people were at the arena to watch off a Jumbotron the other night. There's clearly a lot of excitement in the area. There's anticipation. Just feeling this is a special group, and they love more than anything to win it tonight in front of their home fans. But I don't think the comments from the mayor necessarily made any traction as far as in the locker room or with players or coaches. I think they're singularly focused and one thing only, and that's bringing the Cup back here again.
Yeah, and looking back at Game 4, 3 posts and 0 for 5 in the power play. What was your feel around that Tampa team just in general with, being the better team and having so many chances but coming away with the loss?
Yeah, there was, basically they were very business-like approach, and, they felt like they played well enough to win, and they clearly dominated play for a decent part of that game. That first 10, 12 minutes, they were, Montreal was under siege, and it wasn't for Carey Price. It had been a couple of goal lead early on in the game, so they didn't feel like they were, beaten last game, or they didn't feel like they were outplayed last game. It's one of those things where, the power play has been so dominant in the playoffs, and they were 0 for 5, and they hit some posts, like you mentioned. So I think if, they go into this game at home with kind of a similar mentality where they started last game and play a similar way, I think they'll have a better result. But yeah, there's a reason why they're 13-0 after losses the last couple of playoff runs, and usually Vasilevsky plays a great game, and Kucherov and Point step up after that, and so I would think the same will happen probably tonight.
Yeah, the Point Kucherov line has obviously been really tremendous throughout this entire Stanley Cup playoff drive. Of course, with Alex Killorn doubtful tonight and missing so far the Stanley Cup final, that's a big piece that the Lightning have been missing. But for me, I've really throughout these 4 rounds, really love the way the Goodrow, Gord, Coleman line has played. They contribute at both ends of the ice. How important have they been to their success over these last 2 playoffs?
Well, they've been the difference maker, right? You look at last year's deadline, and they got Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman and traded a couple of first-round picks and a top prospect, and they weren't like the only piece. I think John Cooper put it. They were the final piece to the puzzle, and I don't think they are this far without that line. They've been their best line, I think, in the Cup final. An energy identity line, one that can play against anyone, doesn't matter who it is, and they can create offensively, and they're more reliable defensively. So I think, those are a trio that's been really relied upon a lot in these playoffs, and if they win the Cup, it'll be a good large part because of what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and Graham brought up, the loss of Killorn, and looking at that second line, Steve Stamkos hasn't really been himself throughout the Cup final. How much of that is Alex Killorn, but how badly does this team kind of need him to get going as well?
Yeah, well, they've always been about depth, right? They've always had, I guess the one advantage this team has is if you have a Tyler Johnson on the fourth line, you know how deep your team is, and a Pat Maroon and Matthew Joseph and such. And Stamkos has had his moments in these playoffs. I think, obviously playing with an injury, it seems like he said he feels good enough to play, which is obviously kind of a telling comment. But I think there'll be a chance for him potentially to have those kind of hero-like moments tonight at home, and anytime you have the power play, he has a chance. But, anytime you lose Killorn, it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife on this team. He can do everything. He plays every situation. Power play, penalty kill, it's a big loss, so it's not to be understated. So I don't think they're necessarily worried that, Stamkos hasn't deliver tonight. I think the whole part of this team has made them great and special. Is that they have all these guys that can contribute, and they're not relying on that one line or one player to do it.
Joe Smith is our guest, beat writer for The Athletic, covering the Tampa Bay Lightning. And just staying with Stamkos, how special do you think this run is to him? I know he's full value for his Cup ring last year and definitely scored a tremendous goal in the Stanley Cup final in his few minutes of action that he had on that run. But you have to think that this Cup win, if they end up finishing the Canadiens off, will mean a lot to him.
It will. It'll be special for everybody, but I think for him, considering he's been here forever, he's been the face of the franchise, and all the injuries he's had to go through. And, you're right. I mean, he only played 2 minutes and 47 seconds last year's playoffs, so it didn't quite feel probably the same, but he was a major factor behind the scenes, leadership-wise, and source of inspiration and having messages for guys before and after games. So he was clearly a big part of last year, even if he wasn't playing. But this one, to play every game, to have some key moments in this playoff run, and to not have to come in and put on your uniform right at the end of the game to go get the cup. Now you're in full uniform. You're part of the battles and the wars we've had all the last 4 rounds. I think it'll be really one of those very special moments for him in his career and his legacy here.
Yeah, you bring up the depth too on this Tampa Bay Lightning team, and we look at Victor Hedman as a guy that was right there for the Norris Trophy, and you look at even the pairing of Sergachev and David Savard as being such, I think, just awesome for them. But for John Cooper, you tweeted out his quote, but that Ryan McDonagh is a guy that he's not going to get the Conn Smythe votes that he deserves, but is absolutely so integral to that back end. And just what have you seen from him that you like so much?
I mean, he's just been playing some of the best hockey. I mean, I know Hedman's Norris Trophy guy every year, but the guy who plays like the toughest minutes on this Lightning team is McDonagh and Erik Chernak, his partner. I mean, he plays, obviously does penalty kill, last-minute situations. He's just a classic shutdown defenseman and has played more playoff games than anybody since 2010. He has that experience, too. So he's been playing at a really high level, both defensively and offensively, creating chances. The goal the other night by Gaudreau, he created that with a pinch and then a no-look pass. And we've all been talking about him forever if he would have converted that kind of spinorama goal against the Islanders. I think in Game 4 it would be on highlight reels forever there. So he's just been so important and veteran presence, and I'd argue their best defense in this whole playoff run. And so that's why he won't win the Conn Smythe. I mean, I think it'll be hard to beat Kucherov, Vasilevsky, to your point, but there's no question how important a role he's played.
Just speaking with the blue line, and I don't know how much time you've spent on this. We've spent a lot of time on it because there's no playoff hockey in Ottawa, but just looking ahead to the expansion draft, and I think most teams probably go the 7-3-1 route, but with Tampa, you got Hedman, McDonagh, Sergachev, and Chernak on the blue line. Have you spent much time playing with the cap-friendly tool for the expansion draft? And if so, do you think there's a possibility they go with 8-1 instead of the 7-3-1 that most teams will probably go with?
I do. I mean, I've done probably 5 or 6 mock protection lists for Lightning so far that we've had at the Athletic, so I have plenty of time to tinker with that, and it's gone back and forth. But my latest one was the 8-1 category, protecting those 4 defensemen, because I think it gives you a better chance to win the Cup next year and the year after. It's harder to find a shutdown defenseman than it is to find maybe a middle 6 forward, and I think they would hate to lose anybody like Killorn or a Gord or a Palat, and I think there's still a way to keep them. But I think if you keep your top 4 defensemen and you keep Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, and Cirelli, you've got a really good group, and you're only going to lose 1 player in that draft, right? So overall, there'll have to be some changes made no matter what with the salary cap. And so they'll have to have some painful losses in terms of guys who have been so important. But just my opinion, and we don't know what it'll do in a couple of weeks. But you're in a lot better position to win a Stanley Cup if you have all those 4 defensemen to play big minutes like they've had up the last couple of playoff runs.
Yeah. Do you see the Tampa Bay Lightning maybe having to pay something to the Seattle team in a sense of draft picks or a prospect to kind of just we saw with Vegas, but stay away from some of these core players that they want to keep together on another Cup run?
I mean, it's possible. I don't know if they're going to sell the farm for it, but I think they also realize they need to shed some salary. So maybe if you lose a guy that makes $5 million, that's not an awfully bad thing considering they're already $5 million over the cap with the 19 players. So at some point, you got to trade somebody, or somebody got to take the expansion draft or whichever. And they know how hard it was after last season, how hard it was to move cap money with Tyler Johnson. So I think there's a possibility to do the side deal. They've done a side deal last time with Vegas, but I don't think they're going to, give Seattle 3 guys just to take one. I think they'll have to be careful with that and just know that you're going to lose a player. You can't stay together forever. And if they end up winning 2 cups out of this whole deal, I don't think anybody's going to be, be upset about it.
Yeah, it would be pretty special for the franchise to win back-to-back cups here. Final one from me for you, Joe. Just wanted to ask, you mentioned there the battle for who's going to win the Conn Smythe. Who would your vote be right now? Would it be Vasilevsky in goal, or would it come down to a Kucherov point? How do you kind of favor that vote right now at this time?
Well, fortunately, I have until 10 minutes left in the third period to make that official vote. But I think recently, in my mind's eye, I've had kind of Vasilevsky as a slight favorite, partly because of how important he is, partly because of his role and his shutouts and clinching games of the last 4 series that he's had. And obviously, how the game goes tonight could sway one way or another, because I think it's that close between him and Nikita Kucherov. I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to miss the whole entire season and then not play for a game for 8 months and all of a sudden lead the playoffs and scoring at a historic rate. So I don't think you could go wrong either choice, and kind of leaves Braden Point as the third figure there, considering he almost set an NHL record with 9 straight games with a goal. That's just saying something how deep and how good this Lightning team has been.
Great stuff, Joe. Appreciate your insight. Enjoy Game 5 tonight from Tampa between Montreal and the Lightning.
Sounds great, guys. Have a good one. Enjoy.
And here goes Joe Smith, beat writer for The Athletic, covering the Tampa Bay Lightning, teeing up Game 5 between the Bolts and Habs. We'll come back, one final segment here on In the Box before AJ, Lee, and Connis Vita bring you the drive for an hour here on TSN 1200.